The massive chamber on Nexus Prime buzzed with the sounds of dozens of alien species talking at once. Ambassador Zixthar of the Velian Empire stood at the center podium, his blue-scaled hands gesturing wildly as he spoke. His voice carried across the room through universal translators, each word dripping with amusement. Honored members of the Galactic Federation Council, Zixthar began. His reptilian features twisted into what humans might recognize as a smirk. Today I present to you the most entertaining intelligence reports we have gathered in centuries. The humans, those primitive newcomers to our galaxy, have been spreading the most ridiculous tales about their military capabilities. A wave of clicking, chirping, and various alien sounds filled the chamber as the assembled delegates expressed their curiosity. Captain Jake Collins sat quietly in the human observer section, his weathered face showing no emotion as he listened. Beside him, Admiral Lisa Park adjusted her crisp blue uniform and made notes on her datapad. Zixthar activated a holographic display that showed blurry images of what appeared to be human ships. According to our sources, the humans claim to possess vessels that can phase through solid matter like ghosts passing through walls. They speak of ships that can appear in multiple locations at the same time, as if they exist in several places at once. The Corellian delegate, a towering being made of living crystal, began to vibrate with what his species used for laughter. The sound was like wind chimes in a storm. Ambassador Zixthar, surely you jest. These humans barely understand basic fusion technology. Their fastest ships take months to travel distances our courier vessels cover in days. But wait, there is more, Zixthar continued, his amusement growing. The humans also claim their warships can harness the power of dying stars and drink energy directly from black holes. They speak of vessels that can rewrite the laws of physics as easily as changing the settings on a computer. The chamber erupted in various forms of alien laughter. The Tharkonian representative, a massive insectoid creature with 6 arms, clicked his mandibles together rapidly. This is clearly psychological warfare at its most desperate. The humans know they cannot match our technology, so they resort to telling ghost stories. Captain Collins felt a slight smile tug at the corner of his mouth, but kept his expression neutral. He had heard these same reports dismissed by alien intelligence agencies for months now. What they did not know was that every single report was completely accurate. The most amusing claim, Zixthar continued, is that human ships can exist outside normal space-time and strike targets before their weapons are even fired. They call this temporal displacement combat and insist their vessels can literally attack yesterday's battles from tomorrow's position. A new voice entered the conversation as the Graxian ambassador, a blob-like creature in a mechanical suit, spoke through his translator. Perhaps the humans have been consuming too many of their recreational chemicals. These stories sound like the fantasies of minds affected by their primitive narcotics. Admiral Park leaned forward slightly, her green eyes fixed on the speaking alien. She had personally witnessed 3 separate tests of Project Lazarus, and each one had left her questioning her understanding of reality itself. The aliens had no idea what human engineers had accomplished in the hidden shipyards beyond Pluto. The humans even claim, Zixthar said, barely containing his laughter, that they have ships which can phase between dimensions and exist in parallel realities simultaneously. According to our intelligence, they call these vessels quantum dreadnoughts, and insist each one has the firepower of an entire battle fleet. The Zenthari delegate, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline shell, pulsed with colors that indicated extreme amusement. If humans possessed such technology, why would they hide in their single star system like frightened animals? Surely beings with godlike ships would have conquered the galaxy by now. This comment drew approving sounds from across the chamber. Most species had expanded across multiple star systems within centuries of developing faster than light travel. Humans had been spacefaring for over 200 years, but remained clustered around their home system, venturing out only for diplomatic missions and trade. Captain Collins knew the real reason humanity stayed close to home. Earth's scientists and engineers needed the resources of their entire solar system to build the vessels that were currently hidden throughout human space. Every asteroid belt, every gas giant, every moon had been converted into manufacturing facilities for technologies that defied galactic understanding. I have saved the best for last, Zixthar announced, his voice rising with theatrical flair. The humans claim to possess a flagship that can create new universes at will and destroy entire star systems by simply deciding they should not exist. They call this vessel the Reality Engine, and insist it is commanded by someone they refer to as the Admiral of Impossible Things. The chamber exploded with sounds of disbelief and amusement. Several delegates were making gestures that indicated they thought the humans had lost their collective minds. The Corellian delegate's crystal body rang like a bell as he vibrated with laughter. Deep in human space, far beyond the detection range of any alien sensor, Admiral Ben Carter received an encrypted message aboard the UNS Titan's Edge. The message was brief but significant. Council meeting proceeding as expected. Prepare for demonstration. Authorization code, Phoenix Rising. Carter looked out through the viewport of his bridge at the impossible sight before him. The UNS Ghostwalker hung in space nearby, its hull seeming to bend light around itself. The ship was both there and not there, existing in a state that would have driven alien physicists to madness. Phase technology was not just possible for humans, it was already operational. Back on Nexus Prime, Zixithar was concluding his presentation. In summary, fellow delegates, the humans appear to be attempting the most elaborate bluff in galactic history. Rather than admit their technological limitations, they have created an entire mythology around impossible warships and miraculous technologies. The Tharkonian delegate raised one of his 6 arms. Have any of our species actually witnessed these supposed miraculous human vessels in action? Of course not, Zixthar replied. The humans always have excuses. They claim their ships are too dangerous to operate near civilian populations, or that the technology must remain secret for galactic security. Classic signs of deception. Captain Collins finally stood up, his movement drawing attention from across the chamber. The conversations died down as delegates turned to look at the human representative. His voice was calm and steady as he spoke. Ambassador Zixthar, members of the Galactic Federation Council, I have listened to your analysis of our supposed myths with great interest. As the human observer to this council, I feel I should address these concerns directly. Zixthar gestured toward Collins with obvious amusement. Please, Captain Collins, enlighten us about your mysterious ghost fleet. Collins smiled, and something in that expression made several of the more perceptive delegates suddenly feel uneasy. I would like to request permission to provide a demonstration of human technology to this council. Nothing dangerous, of course. Simply a small display to address your questions about our capabilities. The chamber fell silent for a moment as the delegates considered this request. The Corellian delegate was the first to respond, his crystal body ringing with anticipation. By all means, Captain. We would be delighted to witness this human magic show. When would be convenient for this demonstration? Asked the Graxian ambassador, his mechanical suit adjusting as he leaned forward with interest. Collins checked his chronometer and made a quick calculation. 3 standard galactic days from now would be perfect. That will give us time to bring one of our vessels to this system for your examination. Zixthar's expression grew even more amused. Excellent. The Council unanimously approves this demonstration. We look forward to seeing what humanity considers advanced technology. As the session ended and delegates began filing out of the chamber, Admiral Park approached Collins. Her voice was low as she spoke. Are you certain about this, Jake? Once we show them what we can really do, there's no going back. Collins nodded, his expression serious now that the aliens were gone. It's time, Lisa. They've been underestimating us for too long. 3 days from now, they're going to learn that when humans tell stories about impossible things, we're not sharing fantasies, he paused. Looking out through the chamber's massive windows at the stars beyond, we're sharing blueprints. 3 days later, the orbital observation deck above Nexus Prime was packed with alien delegates and their technical advisors. The massive transparent dome offered a perfect view of the space around the planet, where hundreds of alien vessels had positioned themselves to witness the human demonstration. Ships from dozens of species formed a loose perimeter around the designated testing zone, their sensors trained on empty space. Captain Jake Collins stood at the central observation platform, surrounded by curious and skeptical alien faces. The Velian ambassador Zixthar occupied the position of honor, his blue scales gleaming under the artificial lights. His expression showed barely contained amusement, as if he were about to watch a particularly entertaining comedy performance. Captain Collins, Zixthar said, gesturing toward the empty space beyond the dome, we have been waiting with great anticipation for this demonstration of human technology. Our finest scientists and military observers are present to witness your remarkable vessels. The Corellian delegate's crystalline form chimed softly as he spoke. Our sensor arrays are detecting nothing unusual in the testing zone. Are you certain your ship will arrive on schedule? Collins checked his chronometer and smiled. Actually, it's already here. You just can't see it yet. He activated his personal communicator and spoke a single word into the device. Phoenix. The assembled aliens waited, their various sensory organs focused on the seemingly empty space beyond the observation deck. Seconds passed with no visible change. Some delegates began shifting restlessly, while others exchanged glances that suggested they were already preparing to leave in disappointment. The Tharkonian representative clicked his mandibles together in what his species used to express impatience. Captain Collins, our instruments show nothing but empty space. Perhaps there has been some communication error with your vessel. Give it another moment, Collins replied calmly, his eyes fixed on a specific point in space that appeared no different from any other. Deep within the fabric of reality itself, Dr. Amy Stone monitored her instruments aboard the UNS Ghostwalker. The ship existed in a state between dimensions, its hull phasing through layers of space-time that most species could not even detect, let alone understand. Her readings showed that the quantum displacement field was stabilizing perfectly. Initiation sequence complete, she reported to the bridge, beginning emergence from phase space in 3, 2, 1. Space itself began to shimmer. At first, the change was so subtle that many observers missed it entirely. The empty testing zone seemed to develop a slight distortion, like heat waves rising from hot pavement. Then the shimmer grew stronger, and the fabric of reality appeared to bend and twist in ways that hurt to look at directly. The alien chatter stopped instantly. What emerged from the distortion was unlike anything in their databases. The UN's Ghostwalker materialized slowly, first appearing as a translucent outline that gradually gained substance and solidity. The ship was massive, easily dwarfing the largest vessels in the observation fleet. But its size was not what left the alien speechless. The hull seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, creating an effect that made the ship difficult to focus on even when it was fully visible. Geometric patterns covered its surface, designs that appeared to shift and change when viewed from different angles. The patterns seemed to extend beyond the physical hull, creating optical illusions that suggested the ship existed in more dimensions than the standard 3. Weapon arrays emerged from impossible angles, mounting points that should have been inside the ship somehow extending into the surrounding space. Energy readings that should have been contained within the vessel's hull spread outward like a living aura, causing nearby space itself to glow with barely contained power. Commander Paul Hayes stood on the bridge of the Ghostwalker, watching the alien fleet scatter as his ship's presence warped the local space-time continuum. Several smaller vessels had automatically engaged their emergency thrusters, moving away from what their sensors were reporting as a gravitational anomaly that should not exist. He opened communications to the observation deck, his voice carrying clearly through the sudden silence. Gentlemen, ladies, and honored beings, you wanted to see a myth. Allow me to introduce you to humanity's newest reality. The response from the alien fleet was immediate chaos. Every sensor array within detection range began screaming warnings about impossible readings. The Ghostwalker's mere presence was causing gravitational fluctuations that violated several fundamental laws of physics. Energy signatures that should have required the output of an entire star were somehow contained. Within the ship's hull, Dr. Stone's voice echoed from the Ghostwalker's communication system as she addressed the stunned observers. What you are witnessing is phase shift technology. Our vessel exists simultaneously in normal space and in quantum parallel dimensions. This allows us to manipulate matter and energy in ways that conventional physics would consider impossible. The Corellian delegate's crystalline structure had stopped chiming entirely, his form frozen in what appeared to be complete shock. When he finally found his voice, the words came out as barely a whisper. The energy readings, they show your ship is drawing power directly from quantum vacuum. That should cause a cascade failure that destroys everything within several light years. Under normal circumstances, yes, Dr. Stone replied. However, we have learned to stabilize the quantum foam and channel the zero-point energy safely. It turns out the universe is far more flexible than most species assume. Captain Collins turned to address the observation deck, noting that several alien delegates had backed away from the viewing windows. This vessel represents our basic exploration technology. It can phase through solid matter, exist in multiple dimensional states, and draw energy from the fabric of space itself. We call it a light cruiser. Ambassador Zixthar's blue scales had turned a distinctly paler shade as he processed what he was seeing. His voice shook slightly as he spoke. Captain Collins, our sensors indicate your vessel has a mass equivalent to one of our dreadnought battle cruisers, yet it appears to be generating gravitational effects consistent with something far larger. How is this possible? Commander Hayes answered from the Ghostwalker's bridge. Mass is relative when you can manipulate dimensional boundaries. In normal space, our ship has the mass you detect. In phase space, it has access to the gravitational potential of parallel versions of itself. We essentially borrow mass from alternate dimensions when needed. The Graxian ambassador's mechanical suit whirred as his life support systems worked to keep his blob-like form stable. The stress of trying to understand what he was witnessing had caused his natural physiology to become agitated. This violates the fundamental conservation laws that govern all known technology. Only if you limit yourself to a single-dimensional framework, Dr. Stone explained. When you expand your physics to include quantum parallel states, conservation laws become more like guidelines. Energy and matter can be borrowed from alternate realities and returned when no longer needed. To demonstrate this point, the Ghostwalker performed what appeared to be an impossible maneuver. The ship rotated along an axis that did not exist in three-dimensional space, turning itself inside out without changing its external appearance. The effect was deeply disturbing to watch, as it created optical paradoxes that challenged the observer's understanding of basic geometry. The Zenthari delegate, his energy form flickering wildly with agitation, managed to ask the question that was on everyone's mind. If humans possessed technology this advanced, why have you remained in your home system? Why have you not expanded across the galaxy like every other spacefaring species? Captain Collins exchanged glances with Admiral Park, who had remained silent throughout the demonstration. Her expression was grim as she finally spoke. Because building ships like this requires the resources of an entire solar system. Every asteroid, every moon, every gas giant in our system has been converted into manufacturing facilities for this technology. She paused, letting that information sink in before continuing. The Ghostwalker is one of 12 vessels we have completed. Each one represents decades of construction and the combined industrial output of humanity's entire civilization. The implications of this statement spread through the alien observers like a shockwave. If humans had converted their entire solar system into a shipbuilding facility and had only produced 12 vessels in decades of effort, then what they were witnessing was not just advanced technology, it was the product of a species that had dedicated their entire existence to a single impossible goal. Commander. Hayes spoke once more from the Ghostwalker's bridge, his words carrying a weight that made several aliens step back from the observation windows. This concludes our basic demonstration. We trust this has answered your questions about human mythology. The massive ship began to fade, its hull becoming translucent as it prepared to phase back out of normal space. As it disappeared, the last thing the observers saw was a message that appeared briefly on their communication screens, written in perfect galactic standard. The myths were never myths. They were blueprints. Space returned to normal, looking exactly as it had before the demonstration began. But every alien in the observation fleet knew that The silence that followed the Ghostwalker's disappearance lasted for several long minutes. Alien delegates stood frozen at the observation windows, their various sensory organs still trying to process what they had witnessed. Finally, the Corellian delegate's crystalline form began to vibrate with what sounded like distress rather than amusement. "Run full diagnostics on all sensor arrays," he commanded his technical staff. "These readings cannot be accurate. No known technology can manipulate space-time in such ways." Similar orders echoed across the alien fleet as commanders desperately tried to convince themselves that their instruments had malfunctioned. The alternative, that humans had actually developed technology that broke fundamental laws of physics, was too disturbing to accept without verification. Captain Jake Collins watched the growing panic among the alien observers with quiet satisfaction. He activated his communicator and spoke clearly for all to hear. "I understand you may need time to verify your sensor readings. While you run your diagnostics, perhaps I could explain how we achieved what you just witnessed." Ambassador Zixthar turned away from his frantically working technical advisors, his blue scales now pale with shock. Captain Collins, our instruments must be experiencing some form of interference. What we appeared to observe violates every principle of physics known to galactic science. That's because galactic science has been thinking too small, Collins replied. While your species perfected existing technologies and followed established scientific principles, humanity took a different approach. We decided that if the universe wouldn't cooperate with our plans, we would simply have to convince it otherwise. Dr. Amy Stone's voice came through the communication system from the Ghost Walker, which remained invisible but clearly present, based on the continued gravitational distortions around the testing zone. The key breakthrough came when our scientists realized that physical laws are not absolute constants. They are more like strongly enforced suggestions that can be negotiated with under the right circumstances. The Tharkonian delegate clicked his mandibles nervously. Negotiated with? You speak of the fundamental forces of reality as if they were conscious entities capable of making deals. In a sense they are, Dr. Stone explained. Consciousness and reality have a deeper connection than most species understand. When a sufficiently determined mind applies enough focused will to a problem, reality tends to bend rather than break the mind that challenges it. This statement caused another wave of disturbed sounds from the alien observers. The concept that willpower could override physics was not just scientifically impossible, it was philosophically terrifying. It suggested that the universe was far less stable and predictable than anyone had believed. Admiral Lisa Park stepped forward to address the growing unease. Let me demonstrate this principle in a more concrete way. She nodded to Collins, who activated a secondary communication channel. The space around the testing zone began to shimmer again, but this time the effect was different. Instead of a single ship materializing, multiple translucent outlines appeared simultaneously. The observers watched in growing horror as the Ghost Walker seemed to split into 7 identical copies, each one occupying a different position in space. Commander Paul Hayes spoke from all 7 ships at once, his voice coming through every communication channel on the same frequency. What you are seeing is quantum signature multiplication, a single vessel existing in 7 parallel dimensional states simultaneously. Each phantom ship is fully operational and capable of independent action while sharing a single consciousness across dimensional barriers. The Graxian ambassador's mechanical suit began making alarming beeping sounds as his life support systems struggled to keep up with his body's stress response. This is impossible. Matter cannot exist in multiple locations simultaneously without violating conservation laws. Only if you insist on thinking in terms of single-dimensional physics, Hayes replied from all 7 ships. When you expand your understanding to include parallel quantum states, conservation becomes a matter of dimensional bookkeeping rather than absolute limitation. To prove this point, each of the 7 Ghost Walkers began performing different maneuvers. One phased through a nearby asteroid, its hull passing through solid rock as if it were empty space. Another began drawing energy directly from the local star, creating a visible beam of stellar plasma that fed into the ship's power systems. A third started generating what appeared to be small artificial gravity wells, bending space around itself in ways that created visual distortions visible to the naked eye. The 4th ship demonstrated temporal displacement by appearing to fire its weapons before the targeting systems had locked onto their practice targets. The energy beam struck several unmanned test drones that had been placed in the area, destroying them moments before the weapons appeared to charge up and fire. The 5th Ghost Walker showed off dimensional anchoring technology by partially existing in normal space while extending parts of itself into what appeared to be completely different locations. Weapon arrays emerged from empty space thousands of kilometers away from the ship's visible hull, controlled by the vessel's central consciousness, but operating from alternate dimensional coordinates. The 6th ship began manipulating the quantum vacuum itself, creating energy from literally nothing by borrowing power from parallel versions of the testing zone, where different physical constants allowed for greater energy extraction. The process created a light show that hurt to look at directly, as photons from multiple dimensions overlapped in the same space. The 7th and final Ghost Walker performed the most disturbing demonstration of all. It began rewriting the local laws of physics in a small area around itself. Within that zone, light moved slower. Gravity flowed upward instead of toward mass, and energy converted directly into matter without any apparent source material. Dr. Stone's voice carried a note of pride as she explained what the observers were witnessing. Each of these demonstrations represents a different application of humanity's core discovery. Reality is not fixed. It is malleable. And humans, it turns out, are very good at molding things to our preferred specifications. The Zenthari delegate's energy form was flickering so rapidly that his containment field was struggling to maintain coherence. You are suggesting that human consciousness can override the fundamental structure of the universe itself. Not override, Collins corrected. Negotiate, convince, collaborate. The universe is far more cooperative than most species assume. You just have to approach it with the right attitude. The Velian ambassador Zixthar finally found his voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. If humans can manipulate reality itself, then what prevents you from reshaping the entire galaxy according to your desires? Admiral Park answered this question with a gravity that made several aliens step back from the observation windows. Ethics, responsibility, and the understanding that with great power comes the obligation to use it wisely. We could remake the galaxy, Ambassador Zixthar, but that would make us no different from the tyrants and conquerors that have plagued galactic history. She paused, looking directly at each alien delegate in turn. Instead, we choose to use our capabilities to maintain peace, protect the innocent, and ensure that all species have the opportunity to grow and prosper. That is why we remained in our home system for so long. We needed time to develop not just the technology, but the wisdom to use it properly. Commander Hayes spoke once more from all 7 ships, his words carrying across every communication channel in the system. The demonstration is now complete. We trust this has clarified any remaining questions about human mythology. The 7 phantom ships began to fade, merging back into a single vessel that itself started to become translucent. As the Ghostwalker prepared to phase out of normal space entirely, a final message appeared on every screen in the alien fleet. Remember, when humans tell stories about impossible things, we are not sharing fantasies. We are sharing tomorrow's reality. The question now is whether the galaxy is ready for the future we are building. The ship vanished completely, leaving behind only the stunned silence of beings who had just learned that their understanding of the universe was fundamentally incomplete. In the depths of space, other human vessels waited patiently for the next phase of their plan to begin. The alien delegates were still processing what they had witnessed when Admiral Lisa Park's communicator erupted with an urgent priority signal. The sound cut through the stunned silence like a blade, causing every being in the observation deck to turn toward her. She lifted the device to her ear, and her face went pale as she listened to the incoming message. Admiral Park to all human personnel, she announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to crisis situations. We have received word that the Kethvar Collective has launched a full-scale assault on our outer colonies. All vessels are to implement emergency protocols immediately. Captain Jake Collins felt his stomach drop. The Kethvar were known throughout the galaxy as ruthless conquerors, who showed no mercy to species they considered inferior. If they had decided to test humanity's defenses, they clearly believed the demonstration they had just witnessed was some form of elaborate deception. Ambassador Zixthar's expression shifted from shock to something approaching sympathy. Captain Collins, the Kethvar possess one of the most powerful battle fleets in the galaxy. Their dreadnoughts are capable of sterilizing entire planets. Surely your people will consider evacuation rather than attempting to resist such overwhelming force. Collins looked at the Velian ambassador with an expression that made several nearby aliens step backward. Ambassador, you still don't understand what you've been watching. The Ghostwalker wasn't our secret weapon. It was never meant to be our primary defense. Admiral Park activated her communicator again, speaking a series of codes that meant nothing to the alien observers, but caused every human in the room to straighten with grim determination. Authorization Phoenix 77. Activate the real fleet. All hidden assets are now weapons-free. Deep in space, far from any inhabited system, something stirred within the heart of a dying star. The stellar forge that humanity had built inside the collapsed core of a neutron star began to power up systems that had been waiting patiently for this moment. Captain Lisa Rodriguez felt the UNS Worldbreaker respond to her commands as it prepared to emerge from its stellar hiding place. The ship that began to exit the neutron star was, beyond the comprehension of any known technology, Its hull was forged from collapsed matter itself, material so dense that a handful would weigh as much as a small moon. The vessel didn't travel through space in any conventional sense. It reshaped reality around itself, making the concept of distance meaningless. Meanwhile, in a parallel dimension that existed between the spaces of normal reality, Commander Steve Walsh commanded the UNS Reality's Edge as it began consuming the quantum vacuum itself. The ship converted empty space into raw energy, feeding on nothingness and growing stronger with each passing moment. Its weapons were not built to destroy matter. They were designed to convince matter that it had never existed in the first place. Back on the observation deck, the alien sensors began detecting impossible readings from across human space. The Corellian delegate's crystalline form was ringing like an alarm bell as he tried to process the data flowing in from his monitoring stations. "Captain Collins," he said, his voice shaking with disbelief. "Our long-range sensors are detecting massive energy signatures emerging from locations throughout your solar system. These readings suggest the presence of vessels that dwarf anything in our databases." Collins nodded grimly. "What you're detecting are our actual warships, the ones we've been building in secret for the past 50 years. Each one represents a breakthrough that makes the Ghostwalker look like a child's toy." The space around Nexus Prime began to fill with impossible geometries as human vessels arrived not by traveling but by simply deciding to exist in that location. Ships emerged from folded space, stepped out of parallel dimensions, and materialized from the spaces between atoms. Each arrival defied a different set of physical laws, as if humanity had systematically gone through the universe's rulebook and found ways around every single restriction. Dr. Amy Stone's voice came through the communication system, now broadcasting from dozens of locations simultaneously as more human ships came online. "What you are witnessing is the result of humanity's ultimate discovery. We learned that the universe operates on consensus reality. If enough conscious will is focused on changing the rules change." The Tharkonian delegate was backing away from the observation windows as he watched a human vessel that appeared to exist in 12 dimensions at once. "This is madness. You cannot simply decide that physics works differently and expect the universe to comply." "Watch us," came the reply from Commander Walsh as his ship began demonstrating its capabilities. The Reality's Edge started rewriting the quantum foam around itself, creating pockets of space where different physical constants allowed for impossible energy manipulation. Within these zones, the ship could accelerate to speeds that exceeded light while remaining stationary, or exist in multiple time streams simultaneously. The Graxian ambassador's life support systems were screaming warnings as his stress levels peaked beyond safe parameters. "Your ships are violating causality itself. We are detecting weapons fire that precedes the decision to shoot, and defensive systems that block attacks before they are launched." Captain Rodriguez spoke from the bridge of the World Breaker as her vessel emerged fully from the neutron star, trailing plasma that had been compressed beyond the normal limits of matter. "Time is just another dimension to navigate once you understand how consciousness interacts with space-time. Our ships can attack yesterday's battles from tomorrow's position because we refuse to accept that temporal sequence is mandatory." The most disturbing arrival was that of the UNS Dreamkiller, commanded by Admiral Kelly Foster. This vessel existed partially outside normal space-time and seemed to cause reality itself to become unstable in its vicinity. The ship's presence made nearby space appear to ripple like water, and several alien observers reported seeing impossible things in their peripheral vision, glimpses of alternate realities where different choices had been made. Admiral Foster's voice carried an authority that seemed to resonate on levels beyond mere sound. "The Kethvar Collective has made a critical error in judgment. They believed our demonstrations were deceptions and chose to test our resolve through violence. They are about to learn that humanity does not bluff about matters of survival." The alien fleet around Nexus Prime watched in growing terror as the battle reports began flowing in from human space. The Kethvar assault fleet, which had seemed unstoppable just hours before, was being systematically dismantled by weapons and tactics that defied every known principle of warfare. Human ships were reported engaging multiple enemy vessels simultaneously while remaining in a single location. Kethvar dreadnoughts simply ceased to exist as human weapons convinced reality that the attacking ships had never been built in the first place. Entire battle groups found themselves fighting in time streams where their weapons had not yet been invented, while facing human vessels that already knew the outcome of battles that hadn't started. Yet the Xanthari delegate's energy form was flickering, so rapidly that his containment field was beginning to fail. This is not warfare. This is the systematic deconstruction of reality itself. Your species is not just defeating the Kethvar, you are erasing the very concept of their resistance. Admiral Park nodded gravely as she watched the tactical displays, showing the complete collapse of the Kethvar assault. The battle lasted 17 minutes in our time stream, though some of our ships report engaging the enemy for several hours in parallel temporal zones. The Kethvar fleet has been neutralized without the loss of a single human life. The implications of this statement spread through the alien observers like a shockwave. Not only had humanity defeated one of the galaxy's most powerful military forces, they had done so without casualties while using weapons that treated the fundamental structure of reality as a battlefield resource. Commander Hayes spoke from the Ghostwalker, which had reappeared to observe the aftermath. The demonstration phase is now complete. We trust this has addressed any remaining questions about human capabilities or intentions. Space around Nexus Prime, filled with the impossible sight of humanity's true fleet. Vessels that existed in states that hurt to perceive directly. Each ship represented a different approach to breaking the universe's rules, and together they formed an armada that could reshape galaxies if needed. The age of human mythology had ended. The age of human reality had begun. The news of the Kethvar defeat spread across the galaxy within hours, carried by quantum communication networks that suddenly seemed primitive compared to what humanity had just demonstrated. The most powerful military force in known space had been crushed so completely that their remnant fleets were surrendering without firing a shot. What terrified the galactic community even more was how the humans had won. Admiral Lisa Park stood before the reassembled Galactic Federation Council, her expression calm as she addressed the hundreds of alien delegates who had gathered for this emergency session. Behind her, holographic displays showed the aftermath of the 17-minute war that had changed everything. Honored members of the council, Park began, her voice carrying easily across the vast chamber. Humanity has accepted the role thrust upon us by recent events. We are no longer observers in galactic affairs. We are now the shepherds of galactic peace. Ambassador Zixthar, his blue scales still pale from shock, raised a trembling hand. Admiral Park, your species has demonstrated capabilities that exceed anything in recorded history. The galaxy wishes to understand your intentions now that you possess what can only be described as godlike power. Captain Jake Collins stepped forward to address this concern. Our intentions are simple, Ambassador. We intend to ensure that what happened to the Kethvar never happens again, not because we will destroy every aggressor, but because we will remove the desire for aggressive action entirely. This statement caused a wave of nervous sounds from the assembled aliens. The implications were staggering. If humans could manipulate reality itself, could they also manipulate the thoughts and desires of other species? Dr. Amy Stone's voice came through the communication system as she began explaining humanity's next demonstration. We have been monitoring a conflict in the Outer Rim between the Xarillian Empire and the Collective States. This war has lasted for over 1,000 years and has claimed billions of lives. We are going to end it. The Corellian delegate's crystalline form chimed with distress. Admiral, the Xarillian collective war is deeply rooted in territorial disputes and ancient grievances. No outside force has ever been able to mediate a lasting peace between them. That's because no outside force has ever been able to temporarily remove the concept of conflict from local spacetime. Commander Paul Hayes replied from the bridge of the Ghostwalker. We are about to demonstrate what happens when warfare becomes literally impossible within a specific region of space. On the holographic displays, the observers watched as human vessels approached the battle zone, where Xarillian and collective fleets had been engaged in combat for months. The UNS Reality's Edge took position at the center of the conflict area, with Commander Steve Walsh beginning the most ambitious reality manipulation attempt in human history. Initiating conceptual exclusion field, Walsh reported, removing the possibility of violent conflict from local spacetime in 3, 2, 1. What happened next defied description. The space around the warring fleets began to shimmer with the same effect the aliens had seen during the Ghostwalker demonstration, but on a scale that encompassed entire solar systems. Within the affected zone, something fundamental changed about the nature of reality itself. Cerulean and collective warships found their weapons simply refusing to function, not because they were damaged or disabled, but because the concept of using them for violence had been temporarily removed from existence within that region of space. Soldiers who had been preparing for boarding actions discovered that they could not even form the mental intention to harm their enemies. The effect was so profound that both fleets stopped fighting not because they chose to, but because the universe had temporarily forgotten what fighting meant within that specific area. Confusion replaced aggression, as commanders from both sides found themselves genuinely unable to understand why they had been trying to hurt each other just moments before. Admiral Kelly, Foster spoke from the bridge of the Dream Killer, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Representatives of the Cerulean Empire and the collective states, you now have an opportunity to negotiate a lasting peace while your capacity for violence has been temporarily suspended. We suggest you use this time wisely. The negotiations that followed lasted 6 hours and resulted in the most comprehensive peace treaty in galactic history. With their ability to conceive of violent solutions temporarily removed, both sides found creative compromises that had been impossible to imagine while under the influence of their ancient hatred. When the conceptual exclusion field was finally lifted, the former enemies discovered that their negotiated solutions actually made sense even with their full mental faculties restored. The peace they had crafted while unable to think of war proved to be more lasting than any treaty forced through threat of violence. The Tharkonian delegate clicked his mandibles together in what his species used to express complete bewilderment. You have not conquered these species or forced them to submit. You have temporarily changed their fundamental nature and allowed them to find their own solution. This is beyond governance. This is cosmic gardening. Collins nodded approvingly at this description. That is exactly what we intend to be. Gardeners. The galaxy is going to grow into something beautiful and peaceful, and we will tend it carefully to ensure that growth continues. The demonstration's success led to an immediate restructuring of galactic civilization. Within weeks, humanity had established the Terran Galactic Covenant, a new form of government that operated on principles no previous civilization had been able to implement. Instead of ruling through force or economic pressure, humans governed by temporarily adjusting the fundamental nature of reality to encourage cooperation and discourage conflict. Wars that had raged for centuries ended within days as human vessels arrived to remove the possibility of violence from contested regions. Pirates found themselves unable to conceive of theft when operating in human-patrolled space. Even minor disputes between trading partners resolved themselves quickly when the participants temporarily lost the ability to lie or act in bad faith. The transformation was so complete that within a year, most galactic citizens could barely remember why they had ever thought violence was an acceptable solution to problems. The universe had become a fundamentally more peaceful place, not because humans had conquered it, but because they had convinced it to be better. Dr. Stone's final research log, broadcast across all human vessels, captured the magnitude of what they had accomplished. We have discovered that reality is not a fixed system that consciousness must adapt to. Reality is a collaborative creation that consciousness can reshape through sufficient determination and will. When humans decided that the galaxy should be a place of peace and cooperation, rather than violence and exploitation, the universe eventually agreed with us. The story concluded with a scene that would have seemed impossible just months before. On Earth, in a simple park in the city of New Denver, human children played with toys that casually violated causality and thermodynamics. Their games involved ships that could exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, and dolls that could manipulate the flow of time. In the background, news reports spoke of humanity's latest impossible achievement, the construction of artificial universes to serve as nature preserves for extinct alien species. Death itself had apparently become negotiable when humanity decided that losing any form of life was unacceptable. The galaxy had learned its most important lesson. When humans told stories about impossible things, they were not sharing fantasies or myths or legends. They were sharing the blueprints for tomorrow's reality, and tomorrow had finally arrived.